Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional. It explores courage, responsibility, and standing up to threats even under pressure. Its purpose is to raise awareness, inspire empathy, and encourage accountability, respect, and protection for the vulnerable. A flight attendant's dog lunged at a teen trying to protect his baby brother on the jet bridge, but the teen's quick thinking turned the situation around, shocking everyone nearby. A flight attendant's dog bit my teen for protecting his baby brother on the jet bridge, thinking the child's courage could be punished. He didn't realize the father was watching every second, ready to respond with unstoppable force. The moment teeth sank in, the cabin's balance of power shifted. Subscribe if you believe arrogance collapses the instant true strength intervenes. The leash tightened with a sudden jerk. Strix, the medium-sized steel-gray security dog, had locked eyes on the infant carrier. Not the man pushing it, not the teenager flanking it, but the small, quiet bundle swaddled beneath a navy blue blanket inside it. A low growl vibrated through the canine's throat, almost inaudible beneath the ambient hum of the terminal's climate control system. The dog's handler, a uniformed officer with a shaved head and a blank expression, gave a reassuring tug and mumbled something under his breath. But the dog didn't blink. He didn't move, only stared, and then took a single, stalking step forward. Cale Vallon moved before he even realized it. At 16, he wasn't built like a linebacker, but there was a quiet sturdiness to the way he stepped in front of the carrier, placing himself between the dog and his baby brother. His jaw tightened as he adjusted his grip on the handle of the rolling diaper bag, eyes flicking toward the man who had just introduced himself as Flight Escort Coordinator, a title no one had asked for. The man's name tag read R. Torm, and the smile on his face was the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Everything all right?" Cale asked, his voice carefully measured. Reddick Torm tilted his head, the polite mask on his face never wavering. "Just ensuring protocol is followed. Our K-9 units are highly trained. He's not aggressive, just curious." Aaron Vallon, Cale's father, finally turned fully around. He had been adjusting the flight confirmation barcode on his phone for the gate scanner, still caught halfway between checking updates and shepherding both of his sons through Gate 19. But now he frowned. There was something off about the phrasing. The dog wasn't curious. He was fixated. "This escort," Aaron said calmly, "you're saying it's for passengers with infants?" Reddick nodded, overly smooth. "New procedural update. All jet bridge access for passengers with minors now includes a certified security escort. Just precautionary." Aaron's eyes narrowed. "I've flown this route 20 times. There's never been such a protocol." "It's been recently piloted," Reddick replied, stepping aside to gesture toward the entrance of the jet bridge, where the lights above flickered faintly. "You'll be the first today." That was when Aaron felt it, an unplaceable wrongness. Not overt, not loud, but present, like a weight in the air. The temperature felt cooler now, subtly so, as if the climate had shifted without the system registering it. A faint metallic tang touched the back of his throat. He looked down at Laron, still asleep beneath the blanket, his tiny fists curled near his face. The baby's breathing was steady, calm, but Strix was still staring. Cale's body tensed. He didn't like this. Not the dog, not the handler, not the stiff-shouldered escort. He leaned in and muttered to his father, "He's watching Laron too closely." Aaron nodded, barely perceptibly. "I know." They walked. The first step onto the jet bridge was slow, almost cautious. Aaron led with Cale beside him, still shielding the carrier from the dog, while Officer Branteller followed with Strix. Reddick trailed behind, silent but observant. The sealed metal passage curved slightly ahead, still closed off at the aircraft end. For a moment, it was just the four of them in a narrowing steel tunnel. No announcements, no witnesses. A clicking sound echoed behind them, the gate door shutting. Cale glanced back, instinctively shifting his grip again. Strix responded immediately, taking another step forward, his nose lifting, his body tight. "Easy," Bran said flatly to the dog. "Are we waiting for something?" Aaron asked, turning around now. The aircraft door ahead remained sealed. No ramp agent, no pilot greeting, just a blank surface and silence. "Minor boarding delay," Reddick replied smoothly. "Won't be long." Aaron's eyes moved from the sealed aircraft door to the handler's fingers. Bran was tapping something on a wrist device. A green light pulsed once, then again. Kale whispered urgently, "Dad, he's signaling someone." "Hold steady," Aaron murmured back. Then the moment stretched. Strix leaned forward again, muscles rippling beneath his vest. Kyle shifted once more, not in fear, but in instinct. The dog's leash clicked under pressure. Reddick raised an eyebrow. Bran's expression never changed. And then, outside the narrow window lining the jet bridge, a small transport cart blinked its running lights, twice. An innocuous movement, easily missed. Except Aaron didn't miss it. He had once designed infrastructure alert systems for Halvion. He knew how nonverbal signals moved, and this wasn't airport routine. This was coordination. The air felt colder now. The jet bridge lights buzzed faintly overhead. Kale clenched his jaw. The silence was unnatural, and Strix would not stop watching Laron. "Let me be clear," Aaron said quietly, turning to face Reddick fully now. "If there is an issue with my son, I expect direct communication, not vague references to procedural updates." Reddick's face didn't change. "Of course, sir. We just need to confirm one thing regarding the younger passenger." Kale stiffened. Strix's ears twitched. The dog shifted again, and the door to the aircraft ahead remained sealed. Kale's knuckles whitened as he gripped the carrier's handle tighter, stepping once more in front of his brother. His voice was steady, but low. "Dad." Aaron looked from the motionless dog to the officer, then back to Reddick. His mind raced. Data anomalies. Stolen biometric prototypes. The breach from 2 months ago. No, impossible. It couldn't be connected, but it felt like it was. Something deeper had been set in motion. He took a breath, focused. Stillness surrounded them. And the first step onto the jet bridge felt like stepping into a plan he didn't know was unfolding. The air shifted the moment their shoes touched the metal of the jet bridge. A coldness clung to the corridor, not the crispness of conditioned air, but something sharper, almost surgical. Kale noticed it first. He winced slightly and slowed his pace. "It's freezing," he whispered, leaning in closer to the baby carrier's handle. His fingers instinctively curled tighter around it. The faint scent of metal hung in the air, laced with something sterile and wrong. It reminded him of hospital tubing or fresh battery acid, unusual for an airport, even in winter. Strix, the sleek security dog, stiffened beside them. His paws clicked rapidly on the aluminum floor as he paced with agitation, head locked onto the carrier, eyes unblinking. Reddick Torm followed just behind, his stride deliberately light, but Kale could sense it. His timing was off, his distance too calculated. Not too close to raise suspicion, not too far to lose control. "Dad," Kyle murmured tightly. "Something's off." Aaron's hand shifted slightly on the handle of his suitcase. "Just keep walking," he said, his voice low, attempting calm. "We're almost through." But even he could feel the misalignment now. The dog wasn't scanning bags or sniffing for threats. It was tracking, fixating, and the object of its obsession was nestled in a fleece blanket, gurgling softly, unaware of the gaze burning into his small form. Kale adjusted the strap across his shoulder and subtly moved to place himself more directly between the dog and the baby. A natural gesture, protective, human, but it drew an instant response. Officer Bran Teeler, the dog's handler, gave the leash a slight tug, not to restrain, but to draw Strix back a few inches. His other hand, Kale noted, hovered too close to the baton holstered at his side for a man claiming routine procedure. Ahead, the aircraft door remained shut. The bridge should have led seamlessly into the cabin by now, but instead the corridor seemed to stretch longer than it should, the final door a stubborn blockade. A faint mechanical hum filled the silence, broken only by the sudden crackle of a low-frequency radio. "Phase 1 is successful," Reddick said quietly into his sleeve mic, voice barely audible. Cale didn't hear it. Aaron didn't either. But the dog responded, its muscles tensed again as though cued by sound alone. Outside the window to their right, a small maintenance cart blinked its headlights twice. To most, it would look like a casual signal or idle movement. To someone watching for patterns, it was a confirmation. The timing was aligned. The crew was synchronized. Cale stopped walking. "Dad, why is the door closed?" Aaron glanced forward, eyes narrowing. "That's not normal." Behind them, Bran cleared his throat. "Minor boarding delay, sir. Please remain where you are." Cale's breath caught. "He's watching LaRon," he whispered. Reddick stepped beside them now, his tone gentle but his smile unfriendly. "We just need to check something regarding the younger passenger," he said, and though the words were framed with courtesy, his eyes didn't match. Strix's ears perked, head lowering just slightly like a predator zeroing in. The leash strained against Bran's wrist. One more inch, and the dog would have been too far to control. Aaron angled himself subtly, one hand resting on LaRon's carrier handle beside Cale's. "On what grounds?" he asked. "Standard infant manifest discrepancy," Reddick replied smoothly. "Quick verification." "I've flown with him 5 times this year. Never been asked for verification on a jet bridge," Aaron said, voice neutral but clipped. "New compliance model," Reddick replied. "You know how these things change." Cale took another small step to shield his brother, and Strix bristled. A sharp bark exploded from the dog's throat. Bran yanked the leash, but only halfway. Cale flinched, but didn't retreat. "Sir," Bran said, "please keep your child still. The dog's been trained to react to sudden movement." Aaron turned. "That's not movement, that's proximity." He studied the handler. No apology, no embarrassment, just tension. Controlled tension. Practiced tension. Cale's voice shook slightly. "Why is the dog only focused on LaRon?" Reddick exhaled slowly, placing one hand on the jet bridge wall. "Please, we're trying to avoid escalation." "You're the ones escalating," Aaron said. Strix whined, pacing sideways. Bran's eyes flicked to Reddick's wrist, no words exchanged, but a signal passed. The leash was taut, but not locked. The door remained closed. The corridor felt like a trap disguised as a hallway. Cale's knuckles whitened around the baby carrier. "Dad," he said, voice lower now, a warning. "I don't think this is a delay." Aaron didn't respond right away. His mind was calculating. Every anomaly, every subtle cue, the consistency of the dog's behavior, the irregular delay, the synthetic chill in the air. The escort procedure made no logistical sense. No other passengers were visible behind them. No flight attendants beckoned them forward. The jet bridge, which usually funneled forward like a river of motion, felt more like a stage, lights flickering, timing set, actors in position. He turned just slightly, enough to look over his shoulder. Reddick hadn't moved, but his smile had vanished. Kyle took a single breath, and in that stillness, the illusion broke. This wasn't a delay. This was choreography. Kyle's instinct told him this moment was not a delay, but a setup. The leash snapped forward like a wire under tension, and before Aaron could process what was happening, the dog launched. Strix's body became a blur, muscle and momentum converging in a single, brutal strike. But he didn't aim for the infant carrier nestled close to Aaron's chest. He lunged at Cale. Cale barely had time to react. His body moved instinctively, pivoting between his baby brother and the incoming threat. his arm rising in a protective arc. The impact was immediate and vicious. Strix's jaws clamped down on Cale's forearm with an audible crunch, dragging him sideways into the metal rail of the jet bridge. The sickening sound of flesh meeting steel echoed in the confined space. Kyle cried out, but the sound was stifled by pain. Liran's startled wail followed, piercing the cold, recycled air as the baby's cries filled the corridor like a fire alarm. No one moved to silence. Aaron's breath caught in his throat. His dropped briefcase thudded against the floor as he lunged toward his sons. "Cale!" he shouted, his voice cracking, not with fear, but with fury. He reached for the dog's collar, his other hand shielding the infant now caught between chaos and cold calculation. Bran Teller, the officer holding the leash, didn't move to restrain the animal immediately. His grip remained slack for a beat too long, his expression unreadable, as if he was watching something unfold exactly as scripted. Aaron's eyes locked onto his. "Pull him back," he barked. At last, Bran responded. He gave the leash a firm tug, yanking Strix away, but even as the dog retreated, it continued snapping at Cale, who had collapsed to one knee. Blood now dripped from his arm, trailing down to stain the metallic floor. Cale's other hand refused to release the baby carrier, his grip white-knuckled, his jaw clenched through the agony. The boy was trembling, but steady. "Control your animal," Aaron roared, stepping between the dog and his sons. Reddick's voice cut through the tension with manufactured authority. "The teenager provoked the animal," he said flatly, raising his hands as though explaining a minor delay. "This will have to be documented as passenger interference." Aaron spun toward him. "What did you say?" "I repeat," Reddick continued, tone devoid of empathy, "the boy made sudden movements and interfered with a certified service dog. This must be recorded." Kyle, pale and bleeding, lifted his eyes in disbelief. "I didn't," he began, but Aaron silenced him with a steady hand on his shoulder. "Don't waste your breath," Aaron muttered, more to himself than to his son. He recognized the setup now. This wasn't a mishap. It was a staged reaction to a threat that never existed. A theater of control. The jet bridge door leading to the aircraft suddenly clicked and unlocked behind them. Two perfectly timed. A mechanical hiss released as the door cracked open just wide enough to expose the narrow stair into the plane. Arn's analytical mind noted it immediately. The synchronization was not coincidence. It was cue. Reddick stepped closer now, his polished shoes clicking softly. He adjusted his collar, voice casual but loaded. "We received a report," he said as though discussing weather delays, "that your son attempted to bypass security screening earlier today." Aaron's brow furrowed. "That's a lie." "Then we'll investigate," Reddick replied, unfazed. "But for now, the record stands. Animal interference, screening evasion, and now, non-compliance." Dramatic irony burned like acid in Aaron's gut. Cale, trying to protect his baby brother, was now being painted as the aggressor. The real manipulation wasn't in the dog's training, but in the story being crafted around it. Cale struggled to his feet, face contorted from the pain but eyes unwavering. He refused to loosen his hold on the carrier. Strix, still restrained but growling low, kept his eyes fixed on the baby like a machine awaiting a final command. Bran hovered nearby, leash taut but eyes flicking toward Reddick, waiting. "Cale, don't let go," Aaron said softly, stepping between his son and the others. His voice, calm and measured, masked the storm within. Cale shook his head. "I won't." Reddick's mouth barely moved as he turned toward Bran. His voice was quiet, meant to go unheard, but Aaron caught the words anyway. "If the boy releases the carrier, proceed." Aaron's blood chilled. He turned his full body toward Reddick now, his stance protective and unmistakably hostile. "You don't touch either of them," he warned. Reddick blinked, almost amused. "I think you misunderstand. We're simply following policy." "No," Aaron said, low and sure. You're following a plan." His eyes moved rapidly across the scene, evaluating positions, escape paths, potential witnesses. He needed clarity, but there was no time. Every instinct screamed that the moment Cale let go, something worse would happen. The boy wasn't the target. The infant was. Aaron adjusted his stance, placing his body squarely between the dog and the baby, his mind sprinting for a solution. The tension snapped like a bowstring pulled too tight. Nothing moved, no one breathed. And for the first time, Aaron realized the attack was not an accident, but an intention. Aaron stepped between Reddick and the baby carrier with a sudden finality that froze the air. His shoulders squared with deliberate calm, but his eyes told a different story. Sharp, analytical, wary. His body formed a human barrier between the flight attendant and his infant son. Reddick, caught off guard by the assertiveness, paused mid-step and curled a tight, artificial smile that didn't reach his eyes. He said nothing, but the subtle twitch in his jawline betrayed irritation. His hands, clasped too politely at his belt, tapped rhythmically, one thumb brushing his ID badge with a nervous tempo that didn't fit his outward ease. Behind Aaron, the dog growled again. Strix's stance had changed. It was no longer the focused alertness of a trained working animal, but a simmering anticipation, as though it had been primed to act. The leash creaked slightly under pressure, and Cale flinched. With one hand still clutching his forearm where the bite had broken the skin, he tightened his grip on Laron's carrier with the other, refusing to set it down. His breathing had turned shallow, his cheeks pale, but his eyes, sharp and loyal, remained fixed on his brother. "Let us move forward," Aaron said firmly, without raising his voice. Bran, the uniformed handler, tilted his head and feigned confusion. "For safety, we may need to temporarily separate the older child," he offered in a casual tone, though his eyes betrayed intent. "Just for observation. Protocol." Aaron turned his head slowly, locking eyes with Bran. "You'll observe nothing without cause," he replied. "My son has just been bitten. The only separation required right now is between him and the animal that attacked him." Reddick stepped forward again, tilting his head sympathetically. "I understand your concern, Dr. Vallon," he said smoothly, "but there's been a minor discrepancy flagged in our system regarding your younger passenger. It's standard to verify such things." Kyle looked up, confused. "What do they mean, discrepancy?" Aaron didn't answer. He was too busy measuring the lie he'd just heard. The term struck a chord, one that pulled an old memory into the foreground. 2 months ago, a late-night email, a breach notification from Halvian's central server, flagged under Internal Security Alert Tier 2. It had mentioned stolen biometric prototype data, including early-stage infant recognition models still in testing, supposedly unusable. Supposedly. At the time, Aaron had dismissed it as a failed phishing attempt. But now, with Reddick's calmly delivered accusation and Strix's strange behavior, doubt surged to the surface. "Are you accusing me of carrying a child who doesn't belong to me?" Aaron asked, voice steady but hard. "Of course not," Reddick replied. "But if the scanner reads inconsistency, we're required to act. It may be a mismatch in documentation, or perhaps a rare biometric misclassification." Another lie, draped in technical jargon but carefully structured. Aaron could recognize engineered vagueness when he heard it. Cale leaned against the rail for support. Blood had soaked through the cloth Aaron had tied around his son's arm earlier. Still, he didn't loosen his grip on the carrier, even as his fingers trembled. "Dad," Cale whispered, "don't let them take him. Laron's scared, I can tell." Aaron didn't answer right away. He watched Bran glance sideways toward Reddick, awaiting something. A nod? A signal? The moment felt like the last calm breath before a storm. Every second they remained on the jet bridge meant deeper isolation. No passengers, no cameras, no protection. And the open aircraft door ahead? That wasn't just a way in anymore. It was a line between exposure and silence. The bark came suddenly. Strix barked twice, loud and forceful. Bran jerked the leash reflexively, tightening it, but not pulling the dog back. It was the kind of gesture designed to appear corrective while still keeping the animal ready. A performance for any casual observer. But Aaron was not casual. He saw it clearly. Bran wasn't restraining. He was holding for release. The tension crystallized into decision. "We're going through," Aaron said sharply to Kale. Kale, though visibly unsteady, nodded once. He adjusted the carrier's weight on his good arm and straightened. Reddick stepped forward once more, his shoes clicking softly against the jet bridge's grated metal floor. "I really must insist we resolve this here before boarding." Aaron didn't move. "You're free to insist," he replied, "but I'm walking onto that aircraft with both of my sons. If you try to stop me, you'll be doing so in view of every passenger on board and every witness with a phone." For the first time, Reddick hesitated. His eyes flicked toward Bran again, searching for confirmation. None came. The moment teetered between confrontation and collapse. Behind them, the hum of the jet bridge felt amplified. The cold air hadn't warmed. The smell of metal and tension still hung, and that open door ahead no longer looked like an invitation. It looked like a challenge. Aaron placed a hand gently on Kale's back and leaned in. "Stay close to me. Keep your eyes open. Do not let go of your brother." Kale's voice was barely audible. Not for anything. As they moved forward, Aaron kept his body angled defensively. Strix barked again but did not lunge. Bran stood frozen, waiting. And Reddick, for all his polish, looked like a man who had just lost the momentum. The three of them crossed the final few feet of jet bridge, and in that instant, Aaron decided the only way out was through the danger, not away from it. The moment they crossed the threshold into the aircraft, Aaron's hand gripping the baby carrier and Kale limping just behind, the temperature seemed to shift, not in degrees, but in tension. The hum of overhead lights, the faint chatter of passengers adjusting in their seats, and the smell of recycled cabin air were suddenly punctuated by a wave of silent stares. Heads turned. Some looked at the blood soaked into Kale's sleeve. Others flinched at the sound of the infant's distress. But no one spoke, yet. Marin Voss, the senior flight attendant, intercepted them like a wall of polished authority. Broad-shouldered, well-groomed, and radiating control, he stepped into the aisle just before row 2 and raised one hand with officious calm. "Sir," he said, voice clipped but polite, "I'm going to have to ask you to pause right there." Behind them, Reddick entered with purposeful strides, voice louder than necessary. "This is the passenger whose son interfered with a certified working animal during security escort. The airline requests immediate deplaning for investigative clarification." Kale flinched at the sound, gripping his wounded arm tighter. Aaron, without turning, responded evenly. "We're not deplaning. My son was attacked while protecting his infant brother. I'm invoking my right to review onboard footage. Under Section 14 of System Compliance, access to internal cabin feeds is permissible in the case of passenger injury and accusation." Marin's face did not twitch, but his eyes narrowed. A silent beat passed before he replied, "Access requests must be routed through airline command. For now, please step aside and allow crew to escort." Kyle leaned close to his father, whispering tightly. Bran looked toward the back of the plane. "I think they're planning to take Laurent through the side crew hatch." Aaron didn't react externally, but his mind snapped to attention. That hatch, rarely used, could lead to a handoff away from the view of other passengers. He didn't know what would happen if they succeeded in isolating his son. He didn't intend to find out. Before he could respond, a voice reached him from row 3. A man, early 60s, balding with oil-stained hands and a mechanic's lanyard still clipped to his belt, slid something forward on the tray table. Aaron glanced down as they passed. It was a napkin. On it, in quick ballpoint scrawl, read, "They flagged your infant. Something's off." It hit Aaron like an electrical jolt. He had only seconds to make a decision. Escalate now and risk being physically removed, with no evidence, or play a longer game, collect what they needed, and force the truth into the open. He exhaled through his nose, the barest signal of choice made. "All right," Aaron said aloud, kneeling in front of Cale and reaching for his son's injured arm as if to inspect it. "We'll cooperate." Cale blinked in confusion, but then felt his father's hand slide into the pocket of his hoodie, pressing something cold into his fingers. Aaron didn't lift his eyes. He whispered low and fast. "Code Epsilon 9L. Open the app. Angle it toward them. Don't stop recording. You're not just a witness now, you're a data node." The moment was surgical, precise. Cale inhaled sharply, realizing what had just been handed to him. His father's secure phone, locked to a program Aaron had once built for Halvian systems during experimental research into synthetic detection of behavioral cues. The AI monitored voice pitch, facial tension, eye movement, even unconscious mirroring behaviors, designed to detect manipulation patterns in field interrogations. Now it was going to be turned inward, against the crew. Cale gave the faintest nod, clutching the phone under the bandage of his arm, hiding his wince. Reddick leaned forward with practiced concern. "We appreciate your cooperation, sir. Please remain calm while we contact gate security." "No need," Aaron replied smoothly, standing. "We're calm." But his eyes had gone steel. As he took the baby carrier again and straightened, he surveyed the cabin. Every gesture, every flicker of eye contact from the crew was now being recorded and analyzed. He angled his body just slightly so the phone in Cale's hand had a clean visual line. Behind them, Reddick gave a signal too subtle for most eyes, 2 fingers twitching against his leg. Marin stepped back toward the intercom panel. Cale's fingers trembled, not from fear, but the sheer pressure of staying still. The app in his palm blinked twice, recording. Above him, cabin lights flickered again. Coincidence? He doubted it. "Let's take our seats," Aaron said, guiding Cale gently toward row 5. "Until someone proves we've done something wrong, we'll be here." Marin's mouth opened as if to protest, but another passenger coughed loudly, breaking the mood. A ripple of low whispers spread across the nearby rows. Kyle glanced at his father as they sat. "Do you think they know we're scanning them?" "Not yet," Aaron murmured, "but they'll know when the results start uploading." Cale's screen lit up again. First facial anomaly detected. Elevated pupil dilation. Stress lines inconsistent with situational norms. Subject, Marin Voss. Time, 17:14:06. Reddick turned from the aisle, watching the baby, ignoring the wounded teen entirely. His eyes locked on Laron's tiny face with the precision of a man executing a protocol. And Cale whispered, "They're not even looking at me anymore. It's him." Arn's jaw tightened. A moment later, the intercom gave a soft ping, and Marin's voice echoed overhead. "We ask all passengers to remain seated. A delay is in progress. Thank you for your patience." The voice was calm, controlled, and entirely false, but Aaron didn't move. Cale didn't flinch, because now the evidence was flowing, quietly, invisibly, relentlessly. And in that moment, father and son stopped reacting and started documenting. "Clause 6B, Aaron said sharply, turning his body slightly to block Laron from view. "I'm filing an incident report under Maritime Passenger Ethics Clause 6B. The words didn't just hang in the air, they cut through it. Reddick's confident posture twitched, a flicker of recognition cracking the smooth veneer of his face. He blinked once, visibly thrown. Marin Voss, the senior flight attendant, immediately stepped in as though to override the situation with volume. "You need to step off the aircraft, now. This delay is already a federal deviation if you proceed without validating biometric threat metrics," Aaron interrupted, his tone controlled, his stance grounded like a man who had just flipped the entire game board without moving his feet. especially if the footage contradicts your report. A murmur stirred through the cabin. Passengers, until now silent observers, began exchanging glances. Phones that had been lowered out of politeness were quietly lifted again. Cale sat beside his father, his injured arm cradled close, trying not to wince as he subtly shifted the phone from his jacket pocket to his lap. He tapped twice, just like Arn had instructed. The AI app activated, its interface simple and silent, using the phone's camera to begin a silent log of facial microexpressions, voice stress patterns, and proximity timings. Cale tilted the screen upward just enough. The lens caught Reddick first. The man's features were rigid, but only until he turned toward Laron. Then, a flash of tension. His pupils dilated. His jawline flexed beneath the skin. The software began to log its first readings. Aaron didn't glance at the phone. He didn't have to. "I co-authored Clause 6B, he added quietly. "So, if you're going to accuse my family of being a biometric threat, I suggest you prepare to show metrics that validate that claim." Marin's voice grew louder. "This is above your clearance, sir. You are obstructing a certified process." "No," Aaron said, voice dropping. "You're obstructing legal review. You triggered a protocol on a flagged infant without confirming source legitimacy, which means if your footage doesn't align with a certified biometric threat, you're liable for entrapment under Clause 6B, subsection 4. Another ripple passed through the cabin. A few passengers leaned into the aisle. Dramatic irony thickened. Most thought Aaron was bluffing. But Cale's screen pinged softly. The first data anomaly had logged. Elevated heart rate, stress indicators, and a heat signature spike in Reddick. Only when he was near the baby. Not when facing Aaron. Not when looking at Cale. Only Laron. Cale's throat tightened. He stared at his baby brother, still sleeping in the carrier, unaware of the quiet war unfolding around him. Just then, the secondary hatch at the rear hissed open. Officer Bran stepped through, hand resting casually on the leash looped around Strix's collar. The dog's ears flicked forward. Its posture stiffened. But it didn't bark. It fixated. Aaron spun slightly, blocking the line of sight. He dropped one arm to cradle the back of the baby's carrier. His eyes were locked on Bran's, calm but unyielding. Bran didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His signal had already been received. "Restrain the teenager," Marin snapped, jabbing a finger toward Kyle. Kyle flinched, his hand tightening around the phone instinctively. But before any crew member could move, a man rose from row 4, tall, gray-haired, built like someone who had once been sharp with tools instead of words. "Don't touch the kid," the man said. His voice was firm but not loud. He pointed down the aisle. "He's bleeding. You're not laying hands on a child who just got attacked by your dog." Cale looked up at him, stunned. Blood from his bandage had begun to soak through again. The man, who they didn't yet know was Oren Vale, stood like a wall between Cale and the advancing threat. His simple presence was an interruption of authority, unexpected, unscripted. Marin opened his mouth to protest, but the murmurs among passengers rose. Someone else called out, "He's right." Another voice, "Why's the kid bleeding if nothing happened?" Cale leaned slightly toward Aaron. "Dad," he whispered, "the app just confirmed the stress spike. It's only when Reddick is close to the baby, not us." Aaron nodded, his eyes never leaving the line of crew members before him. It wasn't just Reddick anymore. It was Bran behind him. It was Marin beside him. And it was a process Aaron could now see with chilling clarity. Proximity, accusation, escalation, and separation, all choreographed beneath the illusion of procedure. And Cale, already wounded, was being positioned as the disruptive variable. Not anymore. Aaron lifted his chin. "You're not removing my son. You're not separating us. And you're not silencing this aircraft." Bran's grip subtly tightened on Strix's leash again. Cale's phone pinged once more. "Dad," he whispered, his voice tight but steady. "We just logged our first 2-minute baseline, and the readings are spiking. Reddick's proximity trace is elevated again. Aaron's eyes sharpened. He angled his body slightly so the camera lens had a clear line of sight, and then, without blinking, he made the moment public. "This phone," he said, voice clear enough for the nearest Rose to hear, "has just logged proof that my infant son is being used to trigger a biometric signal." Gasps. A pause. Then the unmistakable hum of multiple phones lifting across the cabin. Reddick moved an inch. Cale kept the camera steady. Merrin inhaled. "This is a violation," Aaron said coldly. And with witnesses now watching, the quiet cover-up began to unravel. Chaos trembles at the edge of eruption. Cale shifts instinctively, placing his body between the crew and his infant brother. His bandaged arm trembles, blood soaking through the gauze, but he refuses to sit down. Around him, passengers fumble for their phones, cameras rising like a slow wave. A murmur ripples through the cabin, uneasy, alert. The stillness is deceptive, like the silent moment before thunder cracks. "Remain in your seats," Merrin Voss warns, voice sharp but strained. That's when a man from row 4 stands. Tall, gray at the temples, he steps into the aisle with deliberate calm. He carries no badge, no uniform, just presence. "My name is Orrin Vale," he says, his voice cutting through the tension. "Former systems engineer. I helped draft Clause 6B in my years with Orrin Systems." He holds up a laminated access card. "This father has every legal right to remain on this aircraft until biometric discrepancies are verified by a neutral party. I suggest you don't touch him." A beat of silence. Then Reddick's lips move subtly. "Abort Phase 2, he whispers into his radio. "We've been exposed." Aaron's mind seizes the moment. He turns, his voice calm but unshakable. "My son," he says, gesturing to Cale, "was bitten while trying to protect his infant brother from a dog that was intentionally released. I want every passenger here to preserve their footage. This was not a misunderstanding. This was planned." The cabin buzzes with awareness. Dramatic irony lands with full force. What looked like a mishap now smells of conspiracy. Cale's phone buzzes in his pocket. He tugs it out with his good hand, eyes narrowing at the screen. "Dad," he says softly, barely a whisper. "The biometric app. It picked something up." Aaron steps closer. "What kind of signal?" Kyle glances up, his eyes darting toward the rear galley. "It says the trigger device is active, within 10 feet. It's coming from behind the beverage cart." Aaron's stomach knots. The crew's strange behavior, the dog's fixation on Laron, the false accusations. It was all leading here. The baby wasn't simply flagged. Someone on board is carrying the device that activates the tag embedded in Laron's ID band. He straightens, voice low but firm. "No one moves," he tells Merrin. "No one is leaving this aircraft. You've activated the wrong protocol." He's no longer pleading, no longer reacting. He's taking control. Merrin tries to mask his fear, but his posture stiffens. He glances toward the galley, then toward Reddick, whose jaw tightens in silent calculation. Passengers continue filming. Aaron looks around, reading the room. The older man in row 4 still stands guard. Cale adjusts his grip on the carrier, his face pale, but his eyes sharp with understanding. The pieces have aligned. They were never random targets. They were a controlled test. Clause 6B is now active, Aaron says, louder this time. And, until it's resolved, this aircraft is under procedural hold. The shift is palpable. The silence that follows is not empty. It's thick with truth uncovered. And now, it was no longer just about protection. It was about exposure. The attendant smirked, confident the attack would go unchecked, unaware that every move, every bark, and every witness had already fed into the father's calculated response. If you believe cruelty under a uniform always folds when preparation meets power, hit subscribe now, because justice never hesitates. Brand's voice rang out sharp and controlled. Everyone remains seated. Security has been notified. His posture was firm, but his eyes flicked toward Reddick with a hint of hesitation, just enough to betray uncertainty. The dog remained near the threshold, its leash taut, its body quivering with restrained energy. But the passengers weren't settling. Several had already raised their phones again, this time recording not out of curiosity, but concern. Cale's hands trembled slightly as he gripped his phone beneath the aisle armrest. The app was running. He saw the interface pulse softly, a faint blue light indicating live transmission to Halvian Systems servers. At the top, a locked icon flashed once, confirming encryption. Aaron, standing just a few feet away, gave a subtle nod. They were no longer witnesses. They were documenting. Aaron turned to Orrin Vale, the older man in row 4. "Block that aisle, please." His voice was even but tight. Orrin understood immediately. "Got it." He stepped forward, planting himself just behind Aaron, arms loosely folded but his stance like a pillar. Around them, the cabin quieted, tension thick as frost on glass. Orrin moved toward the beverage cart. It stood just past the middle galley partition, innocuous at first glance, but something felt off. The cart's placement was too perfect, too deliberately aligned. He gripped its handle and gently pivoted it outward. A faint metallic clink followed as the wheels shifted. And then he saw it. Clipped behind the waist compartment was a slim, matte black node, about the size of a car key fob, blinking red every 4 seconds. Not airline issued, not on any passenger manifest. It was tucked with precision, as though hidden by someone who knew exactly where to place it to avoid routine checks. His chest tightened. He reached toward it, but before he could make contact, a blur of motion exploded from behind. "Stop!" Reddick's voice cracked like a whip as he lunged forward. Kyle reacted on instinct. Despite the bandage wrapping his arm, he stepped sideways and flung his good arm out, catching Reddick square in the ribs. The man stumbled backward with a surprised grunt, caught off balance not by the strength of the blow, but the boy's resolve. "Back off!" a younger passenger in row 5 shouted, standing up. Brand took a step forward. "Sit down, now." But 2 other men rose beside him. One raised his phone. The other extended a hand, palm out, standing between Bran and Cale like a silent barrier. Orrin's fingers grasped the device and pulled it free. The blinking continued, slower now, as though sensing exposure. He turned, raised the node above his head, and faced the cameras now pointed his way. "This," he said, voice steady but loud enough for the entire front half of the cabin to hear, "was placed here to ping an infant's ID. That's illegal under passenger integrity law." A ripple of murmurs spread through the rows. Reddick recovered, his face pale and glistening with sweat. "You need to hand that over, for safety," he said, stepping forward again, but his tone lacked authority now. It carried desperation. Aaron's eyes hardened. "It's already been transmitted." His voice was colder than ice. "Try to take it, and you'll only prove intent." Reddick froze, and then, without warning, the intercom above them crackled to life. "This is your pilot," came the voice, calm, neutral, male. "We are suspending departure and holding all personnel until a federal review officer boards the aircraft." Silence. Even the passengers stopped moving. Brand's hand, halfway to his radio, froze. The line crackled again, but no further words followed. Just that one, decisive order. Cale turned to his father, his jaw clenched. Orrin let out a quiet exhale beside them. The blinking node in Aaron's hand dimmed slightly, as though conceding defeat. Across the aisle, Reddick's composure fractured in full. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stared at the carpet like it might swallow him whole, and Aaron thought, not of the danger they had just endured, but of the moment it all began, of the jet bridge, of the leash, of the false rule, and now, this. And with that one announcement, the power shifted, permanently. The aircraft door remained ajar as the low hum of tension vibrated through the cabin. Conversations had dwindled into murmurs, and every passenger's gaze was fixed on the front, where the atmosphere shifted with the subtle authority of boots on metal. A procession of uniformed federal agents boarded in a deliberate line, each step echoing down the aisle with the finality of a verdict. Their jackets bore the insignia of the Office of Passenger Ethics, and the lead agent, a tall, composed man in his early 50s, held a tablet in one hand and purpose in the other. Agent Ren Darvin stopped just past the threshold, scanning the aisle with a quiet, controlled intensity. His presence wasn't loud, but it made space. People sat straighter. Breaths paused. When his eyes landed on Aaron Vallon, who stood calmly near the beverage cart holding his infant son close, something passed between them. Recognition not of faces, but of roles. Darvin stepped forward and extended a hand. "Dr. Vallon," he said, his voice low but clear. "We've been monitoring interference reports tied to infant biometrics. It appears you just caught one in the act." Aaron returned the handshake with a steady grip, his mind racing to connect the implications behind the man's words. Behind him, Cale sat quietly, his arm bandaged with a spare medical kit pulled from an emergency cabinet, assisted by Orrin Vale, the retired engineer who had refused to stay silent. Cameras from passengers continued recording, now not in fear, but in silent solidarity. The shift in power was immediate. Reddick Torm and Officer Bran Teller, who had loomed with such calculated confidence minutes ago, now stood as shadows of themselves. Bran's hands tensed at his sides, but he offered no resistance as two agents approached. Reddick swallowed hard and tried to speak, but Darvin silenced him with a short wave of the hand. "You'll have your statement time. Off the aircraft, please." Reddick's lips pressed into a hard line. "This is a misunderstanding," he muttered. Darvin didn't blink. "Then you'll want your legal team ready." Without fanfare, the two men were escorted down the aisle and off the plane. Their departure met with stares that bordered on disbelief. Marin Voss, the senior flight attendant, remained frozen near the cockpit door. One agent placed a hand on the back of his seat and said, "Remain for debriefing." Voss nodded stiffly, sweat beading at his brow despite the aircraft's cool interior. Darvin turned back to Aaron. "Your Clause 6B activation triggered a Federal Alert Protocol. That, combined with the biometric data transmission your system sent, fast-tracked our response." Aaron gave a small nod. "I needed someone beyond the chain of command." "You got them." Kyle finally leaned back in his seat, fatigue sinking into his posture. He winced slightly as Orrin adjusted the sling around his arm. Darvin noticed the teen's stillness and gave a rare expression of warmth, an almost smile just enough to register. "He held his ground," he said, to no one in particular. Darvin's agents fanned out methodically, one team sweeping the front of the cabin, another heading toward the rear. It wasn't long before a quiet voice called out from row 7. "We've got another one." A small, blinking node, identical to the one Aaron had recovered behind the beverage cart, was lifted carefully from beneath a seat. It had been magnetically attached, designed to blend in with power modules under the floor panel. "Multiple redundancies," Darvin muttered. They weren't just tracking, they were testing coverage patterns. He tapped at his tablet, pulling up a secure file. "Dr. Vallon," he said, his tone shifting. "You weren't targeted randomly." Aaron raised his eyebrows. "Explain." Darvin turned the screen toward him. The document was brief, a one-page internal memo from Navicore Systems, stamped confidential and leaked just days ago to federal servers via a whistleblower node. It contained a list. One name was highlighted, Dr. Aaron Vallon. Subject profile, Level 3. Risk, Controlled Exposure Protocol. A silence heavier than any accusation settled between them. Kyle looked up sharply. "Wait, that's you." Darvin nodded grimly. Navicore created an internal blacklist of engineers who testified against their technologies in federal review panels. You testified 18 months ago against their biometric tagging beta systems. Aaron's breath caught in his chest. I was part of the ethics opposition. I thought the case was closed. Darvin looked him dead in the eye. They didn't close it. They built a revenge framework, passive target testing. You weren't just a passenger. You were a controlled trial. Kale blinked, struggling to process it. So, Laron was marked. Because of you? Aaron turned to his son, kneeling slightly to level his gaze. The weight of responsibility pressed on his face, but he didn't flinch. Because of what I tried to stop. Kyle swallowed, his jaw tight. Laron, now asleep against his father's chest, stirred softly but didn't cry. Outside the aircraft, storm clouds gathered in the distance, but inside, the reckoning had begun. For a moment, everything stilled. The buzzing screens, the murmuring passengers, the agents relaying findings. It was the eye of a storm Aaron hadn't seen coming, but one he now stood at the center of with irrefutable proof in hand. Darvin turned to his men. Get statements. Preserve everything. We'll convene with the tribunal. And as he walked past Kale, he offered one last nod, not of sympathy, but of respect. Kale's fingers tightened slightly on the carrier handle. The wound on his arm throbbed, but it no longer felt like a scar. It felt like a mark of truth. And now, the trial they tried to stage had become evidence against them. The footage played silently at first, just grainy security visuals casting pale blue light across the dimmed private terminal room. Kyle leaned forward, the sling on his arm creaking as he shifted his weight. The moment replayed in slow motion, Reddick's fingers twitching in a deliberate gesture, Brand's hand loosening the leash, Strix lunging toward him. The room held its breath. Agent Ren Darvin, sleeves rolled and collar open at the neck, stood to the side of the monitor with his arms crossed. That's the signal, he said quietly. His voice wasn't cold, but it was stripped of softness. He'd seen enough operations like this to know precision when it masqueraded as chaos. The footage looped, then cut to a new angle showing Strix sniffing the baby carrier in the waiting area hours earlier. There was no hesitation in the dog's movements. He didn't act confused. He didn't sniff random bags. He went straight for Laron. Aaron sat rigid in the center chair, one hand resting lightly on Laron's back. The baby stirred in his sleep, thumb curled near his chin, unaware that his very presence had triggered a covert test. Aaron's jaw tensed as the next clip played, a thermal scan from the airport's service corridor. A faint glow pulsed within the lining of Laron's diaper. The K-9 was reacting to this, Agent Darvin said, gesturing toward a still frame. A scent tag, micro-imbued, less than a millimeter thick, planted within the inner lining. The compound? It matches a pattern we've only seen in classified K-9 targeting programs that were supposedly dismantled 3 years ago. Kyle blinked slowly, trying to absorb it all. The sting in his arm was dull now, background noise. What took its place was a sense of something larger, something that had always been hidden just behind the curtain of rules and uniforms. You're saying, someone planted that in my brother's diaper? He asked, voice low, tight. Agent Darvin turned to him. That's exactly what we're saying. And the person who did it knew exactly what scent markers would trigger a response from a trained animal like Strix. The room chilled with realization. Aaron adjusted Laron gently and leaned forward. How many times has this happened before? His tone was sharp. There was no trace of the composed scientist now, only a father threading his fury through control. Darvin didn't blink. 3 other infants in the last year were removed from flights due to sudden, alert events. No press coverage, just settlements, all under the radar. And you buried it? Kale asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His eyes were no longer wide with confusion. They narrowed with something else, an edge. We didn't bury it, Darvin replied. We only just began piecing it together. But your flight, your footage, your scan logs, they're the missing link. You expose the pattern. On a side table nearby, a datapad blinked as an incoming secure transmission arrived. A quiet investigator stepped in, handed Darvin a printout, and exited just as quickly. Darvin scanned it, then handed it to Aaron without a word. Aaron's eyes moved fast over the page. At the top, confidential brief, Echo Cradle Tag Variant, Beta V.0.3. He stopped reading. This wasn't random, he said. This was a test on a live flight. Darvin nodded grimly. Aaron, your testimony before the Biometric Ethics Council last year? It made you enemies. You tried to block Navicore Systems from expanding their scent-based tracking program. Their stock dropped 12% after your report. 3 months later, this tagging variant was detected in a commercial supply chain batch of infant care products. You weren't just caught in the crossfire. I was the crosshair, Aaron muttered, finishing the thought. Cale stared at the blank monitor now, as if it still held the image of Strix's leap. So, what happens now? He asked. Darvin didn't answer immediately. He looked at both of them, weighing the next step with caution. We're opening federal hearings. You'll be asked to testify, and we'll need permission to use all of your footage, your biometric scans, the clause activation log, everything. Aaron nodded once. Use it. Make it public. Cale didn't look up when he spoke next. What happens to the flight attendant's dog? The question caught everyone off guard. Even Darvin took a moment before responding. He wasn't the villain, Darvin said. His voice had softened. He was turned into a tool. He'll be retrained, humanely. The medic, who had just stepped in to change Cale's bandage, paused, his hand stilling as he gently cleaned the boy's arm. But the men who used him that way won't be. And with that final clarity, Cale's fear turned into resolve. The first hearing opened with no formal introduction, just a monitor playing the footage of the jet bridge incident. The room, held in a gray-paneled federal auditorium in Brimcrest, was packed. Rows of reporters sat beside regulatory officials, legal teams, and transportation auditors. But Aaron Vallon didn't focus on the crowd. His gaze stayed on the timeline projected behind him, minute by minute, frame by frame, showing the moment Cale stepped between the security dog and the baby, the lunge, the blood, the unraveling. I'll begin with the biometric scan logs, Aaron said, his voice steady but distant, like a man separating himself from his own trauma in order to expose its mechanics. This dataset tracks proximity shifts, canine behavioral sync, and false flag recognition. You'll see the escalation was not reactive, it was predictive. He clicked the remote. Another screen lit up with colored biometric charts. Behind him, Reddick Torm's defense attorney shifted uneasily. Cale sat a few seats back, bandaged arm resting on his lap, his posture tense. He hadn't spoken yet. He wasn't even sure he would be called, but he watched his father command the room not with anger, but with precision. As Aaron detailed the placement of the tracking node, the coordinated distraction, and the false report of passenger interference, murmurs rippled through the room. Reddick's attorney stood. Your Honor, we submit that the escalation was a result of procedural miscommunication. Mr. Torm was under the impression that a security risk had been confirmed through proper channels. Aaron turned slightly, raising a brow. Then, perhaps you can explain this. He cued another video, one Cale had helped gather, the hand signal. Reddick's deliberate gesture moments before the dog was released. A pause fell, and then a second document appeared on the screen. A leaked internal memo from Navicore Systems, time-stamped weeks before the incident. Subject: Operational interference. Target: Avalon. Parental subjective. Trial window: Gate 19. Flight manifest confirmed. The panel shifted forward. One of the regulators, a lean man with silver-framed glasses, adjusted his mic. Dr. Vallon, are you asserting this was a planned test? Aaron didn't answer immediately. He simply nodded once. Not a test, a provocation. Then, for the first time that morning, Cale was called forward. He stood slowly, swallowed hard, and walked to the front, gripping his written statement. He didn't use the microphone. He just spoke. "My name is Cale Vallon. I'm 16. I was holding my baby brother's carrier when the dog attacked. I didn't move in front of it because I wanted to. I moved because it looked like it was going to hurt him." His voice cracked slightly, but he pressed on. "I didn't understand at first why everyone looked so calm after it happened, like they expected it. I thought I did something wrong." One of the regulators leaned forward kindly. "And what do you think now?" Cale met his eyes. "Now, I think someone used that dog to scare us, and I don't think it was the dog's fault." Dramatic irony unfolded in real time, because Cale's truth, spoken without technical language or legal framing, cut deeper than any data point, and the room, full of officials, listened more intently than ever before. Reddick's attorney tried once more. "We remind the panel that Navicor Systems has denied involvement." But just then, a courier entered the room. The lead regulator opened the sealed envelope and passed the contents to the tech aide. Seconds later, a new slide appeared on screen. Whistleblower file. Matched serial identifier. Echo Cradle Beta Program. Node 3C45A1 deactivated. March 14th. The tracking node Aaron had found on the aircraft matched the now defunct biometric trial, intended for lab testing only. Cale turned to his father. Aaron didn't smile. He only exhaled quietly. Then came the surprise announcement from a familiar name, Halvion Systems. A representative from the company stood to declare their support for a new civilian protection initiative, the Cradle Act, named after Aaron's prototype, a system designed to block passive biometric surveillance of infants and children in transit zones. It would use Aaron's design, fully open-sourced, with funding allocated for public integration. But it was Cale who closed the session. He stepped back to the microphone, glanced at his notes, then folded them and spoke from memory. "I didn't do anything brave. I just stood between my brother and something that didn't belong there." The room held its breath. No rebuttal followed. No noise stirred. And, for the first time, the story isn't about policy or privacy or pilots. It was about a teen who chose pain over silence, so a baby wouldn't have to. The hearing chamber fell silent the moment Aaron Vallon took the stand. No preamble. No small talk. Just the creak of the chair and the low hum of the recording equipment capturing every second. The screen behind him flickered to life, displaying the title, Congressional Oversight on Covert Biometric Trials in Civilian Aviation, Session 4, Vallon Testimony. He wore no lab coat today, no badge from Halvion Systems. Just a dark blazer, his son's words still echoing from months ago. "I just couldn't stand there and do nothing." He cleared his throat. "My name is Dr. Aaron Vallon. I'm here not as a systems engineer, but as a father whose infant son was covertly tagged for tracking without my consent." Gasps from the gallery were quiet but real. Across the panel, regulators flipped through thick binders. The chair of the committee, a stern man named Director Trenholm, leaned forward. "Dr. Vallon, you testified previously about biometric manipulation. Today, we ask not about the technology, but the intent behind its use. Please proceed." Aaron nodded, eyes sharp, voice even. 3 months ago, my sons and I boarded Meridian Skyflight 902. My 16-year-old was bitten by a dog deployed under false pretenses. My 8-month-old was flagged with an illegal proximity sensor. I later discovered that a passive biometric tag had been embedded in his diaper lining, manufactured by Navicor Systems. He tapped the screen beside him. A playback began, grainy footage from the jet bridge, showing Officer Brand's delayed restraint of the dog and Reddick Torm's dispassionate glare as chaos unfolded. Aaron let the video play without commentary. The committee watched in silence as Cale, arm bloodied, clung to his brother's carrier. When the clip ended, Aaron continued. This was not the result of miscommunication. Internal messages from Meridian Sky show executive-level approval of live risk trial engagement, specifically targeting passengers under the age of 1. Their goal was to test detection accuracy in real-time civilian environments, without consent. A rustle moved through the press gallery. Behind Aaron, Cale sat in the second row, his sling now gone but the scar on his arm visible beneath his shirt cuff. He stared ahead, unmoving, listening. Dramatic irony sharpened as Aaron read aloud the exact message from a redacted executive's email. Infant profiles will provide an unresisting baseline for signal integrity. Proceed without disclosure to avoid litigation exposure. Trenholm raised a hand. Dr. Vallon, these claims are deeply troubling. Are you saying the airline and the biometric firm collaborated without legal framework? I'm saying, Aaron replied, voice taut, they built a protocol of silence around a child. The twist came not from Aaron, but from the committee's own exhibit. A new slide flashed, serial numbers from the tracking node found on board. It matched one in a canceled Navicore beta registry named Echo Cradle. Beside it, another line glowed. Valine, Aaron. Risk profile. Interference likely. The implication was clear. He had been targeted because of who he was. His previous testimony against Navicore had made him a threat. In the audience, a soft murmur rose, followed by clicking cameras. Aaron pressed on. They didn't just test on a child. They ran a retaliation protocol on a critic. My infant was the bait. My teen was the deterrent. And I was the control. The words landed like stone. Not shouted, not dramatized. Just true. Kyle blinked slowly, jaw clenched. A camera feed caught the moment he bowed his head. Not in shame, but in silent anger. The panel recessed for review. Outside the building, protesters began gathering. Some held signs reading, "Protect our kids." Others simply displayed a line drawing of an infant carrier marked with a red slash over a scanner symbol. 2 days later, the ruling came. A new federal regulation passed unanimously, the Laron Protocol. It banned all passive biometric tagging on minors without judicial oversight, enforced by real-time transparency audits and the establishment of a public registry for experimental technologies in transit. The public reaction was swift and raw. News anchors referred to the case as the turning point for tech ethics. Cale's interview aired the following evening on national television. Seated in a quiet room with only a handheld mic, he looked directly into the lens. "I wasn't trying to be brave," he said, his voice steady. "I just couldn't stand there and do nothing." The clip went viral in hours. Across boardrooms, panic spread. Meridian Sky was placed under federal supervision. Its internal audits revealed over a dozen unauthorized data-sharing agreements with private tech vendors. Executives scrambled to distance themselves, many claiming ignorance, others blaming rogue departments. But the files told a different story. Signatures on non-disclosure memos, approvals for field calibration, and greenlit deployments that labeled infants as non-verbal assets. Navicore Systems, under siege from multiple lawsuits, tried to settle. But one name kept appearing in the suits, Cale Vallon. Ironically, Aaron refused all interviews, offers for documentaries, or book deals. When asked why, he simply replied, "This isn't a brand, it's a warning." Instead, he filed paperwork to launch a nonprofit called Line Hold. Its mission: to protect families from covert tracking in public infrastructure, with a special focus on airports, hospitals, and schools. Its tagline, etched onto the welcome page, read, "Every parent deserves to walk without fear, and every child deserves to be unseen by predators in uniform." Cale stood silently beside his father as the plaque was unveiled. The morning was brisk but clear, sunlight casting long shadows across the concrete near Gate 19. The gentle clink of metal echoed as the cover was pulled away, revealing a brushed steel rectangle set into a low pedestal. The engraving was simple. To those who step forward even when they're afraid. Cale's eyes fixed on the words, unmoving. A breeze fluttered the hem of his blazer as he shifted his weight from one foot to the other, trying to ignore the pulsing ache still present in his arm, though months had passed. Beside him, Aaron Vallon remained silent, his hands clasped in front of him, back straight, expression unreadable. There was no grand podium, no fanfare, just a small knot of people arranged in a semicircle. Airline employees, federal officers, quiet families. A couple of reporters lingered at the edge of the scene, cameras respectfully lowered. But most notable among the attendees were the passengers from that flight, those who had seen the truth unfold in real time. One of them, Orrin Vale, now with a cane in one hand and a thermos in the other, approached Cale and offered his uninjured hand. Cale reached out and accepted the shake. "You changed more than you'll ever see," Orrin said, his voice low and steady, weathered like old stone but tinged with pride. His grip was firm, respectful. No lingering sympathy, only acknowledgement. Cale nodded faintly, his voice caught somewhere behind his ribs. "I just didn't want him to get hurt," he finally said, barely more than a whisper. Orrin tilted his head and replied, "That's the kind that sticks with people." Aaron watched from a few steps away. His expression softened as he saw Cale kneel beside the stroller and straighten the toy clipped to its canopy, a worn plush in the shape of a fox. Laron giggled faintly in response, his little legs kicking rhythmically, unaware that the place surrounding him had once nearly become a trap. That thought, the contrast, tightened something in Aaron's chest. This was the same space, the same section of jet bridge where the air had felt too cold, the same path where the scent of metal had lingered unnaturally, where fear had replaced trust in mere seconds. The same spot where Strix's jaws had locked onto Cale's arm, where his eldest had turned his body to shield the youngest, and where control had slipped out of Aaron's hands until Cale's defiance had become their defense. And now it stood as a silent monument. He glanced toward the rear edge of the crowd and noticed two men in dark suits, plain federal observers, he suspected. One of them nodded toward him in passing. The government, though quieter now, hadn't turned away. But the real pivot had come days earlier. 2 days before the ceremony, a courier arrived at Aaron's doorstep. No signature requested, no return address, just a sealed envelope bearing the Department of Federal Aviation's emblem and a wax stamp that indicated internal ethics jurisdiction. Aaron had opened it without ceremony, his hand steady but his breath uncertain. Inside was a single printed line. Your Clause 6B co-authorship has now been expanded to 6B.1, permanently named the Vallon Clause. That was all. No letterhead, no explanation. Just the sentence, as if the system had chosen precision over sentiment. He read it once, then again. Then slowly folded the paper and walked it across the room to Cale, who had been sitting by the window with Laron asleep in his lap. "This is yours more than mine," Aaron said, handing it over. Cale took it, read the line, and then looked up at his father. A slow grin spread across his face, not wide or boastful, just real. "Not bad for a kid who got bit," he said with a quiet smirk, voice dry but light. And in that moment, the wound no longer defined him, it crowned him. Seconds later, the father acted, neutralizing the threat, securing his children, and leaving the crew frozen in disbelief. The dog bite became the spark that exposed arrogance and demanded accountability. If you believe real authority protects the innocent with precision, calm, and unstoppable force, subscribe now, because justice always lands first.